All right, Caesar, Book 4. We're in Chapter 32. Caesar has just repaired all of his ships and gotten everything in order after the big storms have broken everything. Dum ea geruntur, which starts this referring back to the previous section. While ea is our neuter plural, not she, but the things. And in this section too, we're going to see is, ea, id, the word just for usually he, she, or it, like ea, used really substantively sometimes and adjectively at other times. So here it's just like a noun. Geruntur, gero, gerere, is a very verby verb. It means usually something from context, not necessarily meaning something by itself. So while these things were being done, there's not really a strong sense of what gero, gerere means. When it's with clothing, it means to wear, but here we can just say to do. And it's present tense. The book mentions it's a historical present that makes it sound like something's happening right now. So even while these things are being taken care of, being done. Legione ex consuetudine una frumentum missa. Legione and missa are ablatives, so they're an ablative absolute, and here in the middle we get a little bit more of a phrase with our ablative absolute. Missa or mitto, mittere, missi, missus, to send. So with the legion having been sent, ex consuetudine. We're going to see this word again. Consuetudo means a habit or a custom or a practice. So this is like from habit. Una, with that long A, is ablative as one or together. And then frumentatum is actually from the verb frumentor, not the noun frumentum. And you can see that tatum is what tells you that, not frumentum, frumentatum. It comes from the verb form. And it's the supine, which is really like the fourth principal part, made into a fourth declension noun. And here it's just accusative, so it looks just like the fourth principal part. Supine is going to be used to show purpose. It's really easy, like to get grain, or like to forage. Alright, so they've sent out one legion to get some grain. Like they talked about, they need food. Quae appellebatur septem, which was called, so it was the seventh legion, is all it's saying. Neque ulla ad id tempus belli suspicione interposita. We have another ablative absolute here, connected with a neque, so you can say and not. But then we have ulla, which means and not any. So you might say like with no. And ulla describes suspicione, suspicion, and interposita is our participle in this ablative absolute. With no, or not any, suspicion having been interposed or alleged. Ad id tempus. Id, like I said, we're going to see this is a id. Id really means it. So, to it time, well, that doesn't make any sense. So sometimes you can use it like an adjective and just say like at that time. But id is really, it's really a pronoun instead of an adjective. Tempus is neuter, which is why id is neuter, because it's sort of describing the tempus. I think I put my parentheses in the wrong place. So with not any suspicion having been alleged at that time of war, it's a suspicion of war, and so you get your belly in there. And it's still an ablative absolute. So while those things are going on, and with these ablative absolutes, cum pars hominum in agris remaneret. It's a cum clause. We can see our verb is subjunctive. That helps you identify your cum clause. Remaneret is imperfect subjunctive. And it's singular because the subject is pars. It's sort of with a part hominum is genitive plural of men, of the men. While part of them remained in the fields. And then we have the sort of response to that, of course. If part of them are one place, you're going to tell them where the other part are. Pars etiam in castra ventitaret. And here's another subjunctive, ventitaret. And a pars even in castra. Castra is the accusative plural of castrum. So if we have an accusative after in, remember that it means into. Into the camps, or just the camp. Ventitaret. The book tells you this means to come frequently, and it says frec form. What that means is it's frequentative. That's when you just take a verb, and instead of saying like venio, venire means to come, like they're coming into the camp, you can change the verb a little to mean to come repeatedly. So, let's see if you can see this. Okay, here's a big piece of paper. This is, make it maybe a marker so you can see. The way you make a verb frequentative is you start with your principal part. So we have the verb to come. Venio, venio, venire, veni, ventus. And we have our fourth principal part there, ventus. We're going to add ventito. We're just going to add a little it in there. Okay, I know that's really dark. And then we're going to make it into a first conjugation verb. Avi, atus. Ventito, ventitare, ventitavi, ventitatus. So you have the verb to come, and this is like to come frequently. So ventitare is your infinitive, and then you have your endings. That's a imperfect subjunctive. And it's called frequentative, which is how you can get the word repeatedly in your English. So one part of them are going out to the fields, one part of them are bringing things back over, carrying it back and forth. Ei, qui pro portis castrorum in statione erant Caesari nuntia verunt, and that starts an indirect statement. Ei, usually the book will say you have to supply ei, but here Caesar's kind enough to give us our ei. This is the plural of is, ea, id. So is means he and ei means them. Them qui, them who, or they who, like the ones who, pro portis castrorum. Pro means for, but it can also mean in front of. And here, in front, for the doors doesn't make any sense, but in front of. And a porta is a gate. We get words like puerto in Spanish, door, and portus, such as fourth declension, is a harbor, but a porta is a gate. In front of the gates, castrorum, of the camp. So they who, in front of the gates of the camp, in statione, which really means like on station, are on guard duty. Right? They're stationed there. Erant. Here we get our verb. Those who were on guard duty in front of the gates of the camp. Caesari nuntia verunt. They announced, and Caesari is dative there with nuntia. Yeah, the word nutio, nuntiare always wants a dative. You announce something to someone. And here we're going to have an indirect statement after announce. So ei is the subject of nuntia verunt. They announced to Caesar that. Now our subject's accusative and our verb is infinitive. That's what indirect statements are. Subject, accusative, verb, form, infinitive. Pulverem maiorem. This is kind of there's a couple sentences here that are a little twisty-turny. Pulvis is dust. And we have the word like if you pulverize something, you smash it into dust. Right? It's going to pulverize. and it's the subject here. It's accusative because it's the subject of an indirect statement. And then maiorum means bigger or greater. So greater dust, quam suetudo feret. And we just saw the word suetudo up in the very first line. It means than habit or than custom. Here we can say than usual, and then fere is just fero fere tulilatis, than was accustomed to being, to bearing. So greater dust than was usual. In ea parte, here we have another is ea id, which means he, she, it. So ea means she or her, and then it's feminine because partus is feminine. So not in it part, but in that part. Even though ea is not really an adjective, it's used adjectively here. Then was usual in that part. Videri. And now we have our verb infinitive. So they announced that a greater amount of, more dust, greater dust than was usual in that part. Videri. And infinitives that end in I are passive. So not to see, but to be seen. So greater dust was seen in that part than normal. Quam in partem, in which direction legio iter fecissent, the legion, and literally this said, had made a journey. And usually when you have this to make a journey, we can even say to march, because that's what legions do, in which the legion had marched, or in which direction they had made a journey. So a greater dust was seen than usual in that part, in which direction the legion had made a journey. And then we have fecissent, which is pluperfect subjunctive. Alright. Caesar id quod erat suspicatus aliquid novi a barbaris initum concilii. We'll stop there. Caesar. And then id quod erat. Id quod, again, we've seen a few times as the thing which erat, which was. And then suspicatus, you can see the word like suspect in there. The thing you really need to know is that it's suspect is deponent. So this looks like a perfect passive participle, but it's really active. So Caesar's suspecting that which was, so the thing which was, and then we're going to have an indirect statement telling us exactly what that thing is which was. Aliquid novi a barbaris initum esse concilii. Aliquid means something, and you see that quid in there. Quid means what. And ali, you can put on certain question words to mean like some. So quid means what? Somewhat, or something. Quis means who, so aliquis means some who, or someone. So you can kind of see that it's quid in there. And then, remember, after sine, sine, all the olis run away. But there's no sine, sine here. So we're going to keep our oli. Caesar, suspecting the thing which was sort of, namely, that something, and usually with aliquid you have a partitive genitive, something of a, here we have novi concilii for our partitive genitive, something of a new plan. Initum is our verb. It's an infinitive. The essay's just been ellipted. This is the verb ineo, inire, inii, initum. And with the word concilium, it means to form a plan. So something of a new plan was being formed, or was formed, a barbaris, by barbarians, or by the, I guess by the barbarians, by the foreigners. Whenever you have a passive like this, initum esse, the something of a new plan was formed. And the people who do it, a barbaris, this is an ablative of agent. And it's going to have a preposition for people. People have prepositions. So a barbaris, because the barbaris are people. Something of a new plan was formed by the foreigners, by the barbarians. So this next part, we got to go all the way to the next page to get our verb. And then the rest of it's all an indirect statement. So the first word on the next page, usit, is the verb of this. Caesar, suspecting blah, 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 he ordered. And even though you might think that there should be an indirect command here, usit, eubeo, eubere, usi, usus, always takes an indirect statement form. So that's why. So we're looking for infinitives. He ordered someone to do something. So keep that in mind. We're expecting to see a lot of infinitives. And in fact, there are 4 infinitives. So now we can go to the Cortes. This is who he ordered. He orders the cohorts, which is a group of soldiers, quae in statione erat, who were, again, in statione, right? They're at their stations. They're on guard duty. The cohorts who are at their stations, secum in eam partem proficisci. Secum, the se refers back to Caesar. And remember, when you say with someone, the cum comes after. So secum means with himself, right? With him, referring back to Caesar. Caesar ordered the cohorts who were on duty with him, not on duty with him, but to do something else with him. Secum in eam partem. Eam here is ea id, right? So in that part. Remember, Latin doesn't have a definite article. It doesn't have a word for the. Ea is ea id is as close as we really get in Latin to a word for in the part, in that part. And then proficisci is an infinitive. These words, proficiscor, proficisci, there's a lot of words with ficiscor, ficisci. That means to go, and then proficisci is like to go forward or to set out. So it's deponent, and this is one of the most common deponents that we see, the ficiscor, ficisci ones. It doesn't exist by itself. It always has a prefix, but it has numerous prefixes to go in, to go out, to go down, to go forward. So he ordered the cohorts who were on guard duty to set out with him into that part of, and they're talking about the place where they saw all the dust. Ex reliquis duos in stationem succedere, and we're still taking that usit as our he ordered. Duos is accusative. 2 ex reliquis, like from the remaining, and we have to understand the cohorts. 2 cohorts from the remaining cohorts. So instead of repeating all that all the time, they leave it out. In stationem, I'm not going to tell you what that means. Succedere. This is like the word to succeed, which means to take someone's place, right? Barack Obama succeeded George W. Bush, who succeeded Clinton. You talk about the kings and emperors and stuff too. So you order 2 from the remaining to take their place on guard duty. Reliquas, the remaining, and then 2 things for them. The remaining amari et subsequi. So he's remaining the cohorts to set out, and 2 to take their places, and the remaining amari, with that I at the end of the infinitive, remember that means it's passive infinitive. I feel like we've seen a million passive infinitives recently. I hope that they're coming to mind quicker and you're able to recognize them fast. So not to arm, but to be armed. So like to arm themselves. The remaining to be armed, and confestem, se subsequis. Se refers back to Caesar, he himself. And then subsequi is a deponent. Besides proficiscor, this kind of deponents, sequor, sequi is a very common deponent. Subsequi is just really intensifying, to follow closely. So to be armed and to follow se, to follow him closely, confestim. We have the word in Latin festino, festinare, which means to hurry. And confestum is an adverbial form. It's related, the festum part in the middle. Immediately, or like with haste, hastily. Okay. So the cohorts are on duty. He says, come with me. And 2, he's saying, take their places, and then all the rest of them also have to come. So they're all setting out. Armed and quick. Cum Paulo longius a castris processit. This cum is definitely a temporal cum. When he had sort of proceeded, when he had gone out, Paulo longius. Paulo means like by a little, and longius is comparative, so further by a little or a little bit further, you might say. When he'd gone out a little bit further, a castris, from the camp. And then the whole next part is an indirect statement from suos all the way down to animad vertit. Suos ab hostibus premi atque aegre sustinere et conferta legioni ex omnibus partibus tela coici animad vertit. So we have to go down to our verb. Let's start there first. Animad vertit means notice. So when he had gone out, he noticed. There's really 2 parts, or 3 parts to this verb. Anima is your soul, your spirit, your mind. And then you have the word ad, A-D, sort of in the anima, they share an A. It means to. And then vertit means to turn. So if you turn your mind to something, you notice it. And that's how that word is made up. Animad vertit. So he noticed that. And then we have an indirect statement. We expect our subject to be accusative and our verb to be infinitive. So we're going to see more infinitives here. You know, usit was just an indirect statement. So we can go back to the front now. Suos is accusative. There's our accusative subject. He noticed that his own, and we have to supply men or soldiers, ab hostidus premi. Premo, premere means to press. So what does it mean that there's an I at the end? Is it perfect? No. It's a passive infinitive, like we've seen so many times. This is third conjugation. It goes premo, premere. And that's the one that, instead of just putting an I in place of the last E, you take off the whole ERE. So, for example, with amari, that we just saw, to be armed, that's first conjugation. It should be A-R-M-A-R-E, and we traded the E and an I. And that's all, you just changed the last letter. But for third conjugation, the whole ERE comes off. And that's why it's just a premi. Premo, premere, pressi, pressus. That his people not were pressing, but were being pressed. Ab hostibus, by the enemy. There's another ablative of agent who's doing this passive thing. They were being pressed by the enemy. And because hostibus are people, they have a preposition. Ab hostibus. So they're being pressed by the enemy, and suos is still our subject. Aegre sustinere. Aeger means sick or ill. And then when we have the E on the end, it makes it an adverb. So sickly or illy. We don't say illy, though, in English. Sustinere, we know it means to, like, stand their ground. So they were being pressed by the enemy, and they were standing their ground. Aegre, you can say poorly. It's very British to say ill. They were ill able to stand their ground. But it just means in a bad way, like when you feel sick. Et conferta legioni is ablative absolute, with the legion having been sort of crowded together, compacted. Ex omnibus parte, from all parts, tela koniiki. Tela, you know, or spears or weapons. Koyiki is another infinitive that's passive. Spears were being thrown. Yakio yakere is to throw. So ko yikar is like to throw something together, like they're being thrown in. So they've been surprised, they've been crowded together, and because they're so close, the enemy can hit them with their spears easily. Nam quod omni ex reliquis partibus demiso frumento. Nam quod is pretty repetitive. For because for sound better in English. And then we have a big old ablative absolute. Omni describes the frumento, all the grain. And then de meso means to reap. So with all the grain having been reaped, ex reliquis partibus, from the rest of the parts, from the remaining parts, pars una erat relicta, one part was left. And we get, it's kind of repetitive with the reliquis. From the rest of the parts, all the grain had been reaped, so one part was left. And because of this, because one part was left, suspicati hostes huc nostros estes venturos. Suspicati describes the hostes, and remember suspicor is deponent, so this looks like perfect passive participle, but it's really a perfect active. So like the enemy suspecting, and we're going to have an indirect statement, that nostros, our soldiers, esse venturos is like venturos esse, they would come, and it's future infinitive, so they suspecting that our soldiers would come huc, which means to here, or to this place. Hic means here, huc means to here. So because there's one part remaining, the enemy suspecting that our soldiers would come to this place, what they did was noctu in sylvis delituerant. They had hidden, that's the delituerant, themselves in sylvis, in the forests, noctu, at night, the ablative time when. So basically, there's only one part left of the grain. So the enemy knows that they have to go to this one place where there's the only place with grain left, and they hid themselves there at night for an ambush. And then this next part is one of the places. It's kind of snaky, I guess. Kind of goes in and out. Tum dispersos depositis armis in mettendo occupatos subito adorti paucis interfecis reliquos incertis inordibus perturbaverant simul equitatu atque escidus circum dederant. Then, alright, if we read from left to right, we see that there's lots of accusatives. Dispersos is accusative, occupatos is accusative, reliquos is accusative. These all refer back to the soldiers. Our verb perturbaverant is pluperfect, and the subject is the hostes, the enemy. Then the enemy had disturbed greatly, and then those accusatives are the people they disturbed. The dispersed people, the busy people, the remaining people. Okay? Then we have all these little things sort of dispersed in between. Dispositis armis means with their weapons having been placed down. It's an ablative absolute. Paucis interfectis, the book translates for you, after a few had been killed. It's another ablative absolute. And then incertis ordinibus is another ablative absolute because their ranks were disordered. Adorti is our subject, it's nominative, and it means the people sort of rising up. Ortor, I was related to the word orient, so rising up, attacking, you can say, like people who are uprising, people who are attacking. Attacking, they disturbed. And then let's just start with it. The dispersed people. with their arms having placed down. Why in mettendo? Which means it's a gerund. You get that nd in there. And remember, gerundives are adjectives, so they describe things, and there's no other thing here. There's no other ablative. So this is just by itself. It's a gerund. I feel like we just saw the word to reap, and now I can't find it. Oh, it was demesso. Yeah, demesso and the mettendo are related. So, in order to reap, gerunds can show purpose. So, the people who are dispersed with their arms having been placed down to reap, sort of busy, right? Because they are either engaged, they're reaping. Suddenly, we can take that with the like suddenly attacking. After a few had been killed, they greatly disturbed the remaining with their ranks having been disordered. There's a lot of different ways you can put all that stuff together. It's a lot to figure out and put together. You just got to figure out a way that sounds good in English and stick to it. And make sure you get everything in there. Adorati orior is deponent, which is why this sounds active, like attacking or rising up. It's not a present participle, but it's a deponent passive participle. Simul, equitatu atque blah blah blah. Okay. Circum dederant is another pluperfect. Do, dari, dedi, datus, and then circum. So it means to give or put around something. So they had surrounded at the same time. That's your simul, like simultaneous. At the same time they surrounded, and you have to understand the rest or the remaining, like we have for the reliquos here. They surrounded the rest. How equitatu et essedis, which is a really weird word. I don't know if I've ever seen. It's a two-wheeled chariot used by the Britons. So with cavalry and two-wheeled war chariots. Or you could probably just say war chariots, and for your essedis, and be good. Alright, so that's 32. Let me know if you have any questions. Please don't forget. So write them down somewhere if you didn't understand something, or don't forget to let me know that if you need something explained better. Alright, there you go.